wrist issues, right? So if your wrist is hurting. When coning down, if you find that this isn't giving you enough room or control, you can also introduce water to your forearm and cone down like so. So especially once you start getting into really big pieces, utilizing more parts of your arms and more parts of your body can be super helpful. Again, so with this hand, as I'm coming down, because this is a much bigger piece, I'm actually wedging my elbow into my thigh to push it in and give myself some more stability. So we're gonna go back up again. I usually do okay just using my hands in a normal technique for this amount of clay, but when I start going up to like 10, 12 pounds of clay, that's when I'll start to wedge my hand in. As we go and we pull this up and we make this planter bigger, one thing to keep in mind is that you'll want it to be really centered. As you go throughout throwing a big piece, if one part of it is centered, you're going to be moving around a lot more clay, right? So there's a higher likelihood that it'll get thrown off. You can see those, like little pimples. Okay, I think we're almost there. I'm gonna cone up and cone down one more time. Another tip for throwing bigger pieces is to make sure you're using really soft clay. So the clay should be really malleable, especially if you're not used to centering large amounts of clay. That'll make it a lot easier. This looks pretty good. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. I'm going to slow down the wheel a little bit. Whenever we start to work further away from the center, we want to make sure the wheel's going a little bit more slowly. I'm going to make my hole, and you might notice that I'm starting off with a much wider base than usual. The reason for that is that we're going to be we want a wider base for our pot. So I'll start it off at this stage so that I will have less clay to move. So I'm just widening this a little bit, and then I'm going to take my fingers. One technique, if you are widening a big pot like this, is to use a sponge while you widen. This will help make sure that, sometimes it can help to distribute the pressure a little bit and keep control. But the other thing too is that you might find it more difficult to keep moisture, and sponges can be really helpful in doing that. So I've just got my hand braced flat here, and then I'm pushing the sponge into the side. I've got a little bit of a raised middle, so I'm going to take my sponge and compress down the middle just to flatten it out. Seems pretty good. I'm going to widen it just a little bit more. Perfect. There we go. Perfect. So now I'm going to slow the wheel down even more, just because we've got a lot of clay to move. I'd like to move a lot slower, and I pull slower when the clay is heavier. I'm going to take my thumb and make a little divot down here. Because you're going to be moving more clay, this is also a good opportunity to use a sponge while you throw. I personally like to use a sponge on the outside rather than on the inside, but either way is fine. I'm going to take the sponge down here. I've got 2 finger pads in here. And I'm gonna start the pole up, and you'll notice that my elbows are locked in here. But oftentimes, once you get to the top of the pole, I find that my hands sometimes need to come off of my body. And that can be one of the more challenging parts about throwing larger, if you don't have a lot of stability in your core. That's something you can practice by throwing like smaller items that are taller and skinnier, because as it gets up here, you kind of have to lock in your arms, right? Like this to throw. And a planter can also be a great way to learn, because it's a little bit lower, right? So you can work with larger amounts of clay and you won't have to stand up here. It's really hard, but like I've thrown some big vases, and then it's hard to keep the control, right? When your arms are like that. So I'm gonna introduce some more water, and I'm gonna do another pull. Another thing to note is that I'm using more pressure with my outside hand than I am with my inside hand. The reason for that is that I don't want the pot to go out so much. Also, this wheel's going too fast. Ah! Way too fast. There we go. There we go. Okay. Do one more pull. And again, I like to make a little divot with my thumb each time, especially when I'm pulling large amounts of clay like this. Awesome. That looks really good. Because I use more force when I'm pulling up larger, you'll notice that there's rings. Sponges can also help with getting rid of those, but I think they also look kind of cool. Like I'm not mad at the texture from throwing. Now from this point you can shape it. I've got a lot of extra clay down here, so I think I'm gonna bring this out a little bit. What I'm doing is I've got my my outside hand is sitting a little bit up. My inside fingers I'm pushing at the base, and they're pushing outwards, because I just want to make it more of a square looking planter. So you also kind of want to bring in the lip a little bit. I'm going to use collaring for that. So I'm going to put my hands in these positions. I want to make sure I've got moisture on this part, this part, this part, this part, this part, and this part. I call this the ceramics gang sign. And I'm just going to slowly encourage the clay in. So that can be really helpful if a piece comes out a little bit more than you would like. Looks a little bit wonky, and then I'll just pull it back in like that. You can also make a flange or like a little accent with your fingers. To do that, I'll support it and put my finger below here to make a little divot. So just hold it nice and still until you get a nice defined flip, and then you can angle it out. That's really fun. I like that detail on the planter. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. We're a little bit thin in that one spot there. Just gonna push it out a little bit, but otherwise very happy with this. Do you guys have any questions? No? Natalie, is that helpful? Perfect. Cool. Rocking and rolling.